Hey y'all, welcome back. I'm Shayna Cersei. I'm so excited to paint with you today. And today I'm doing another page in my watercolor journal, and I am going to be painting some flowers, but we're going to give it a whole background and do some kind of mood setting. I am using for supplies today 6x9 bow hung watercolor journal, 140-pound cold press, 100% cotton paper. I'm using my Core watercolor paint, QOR by Golden. I also have a 1/2 inch brush. So this is a flat brush or square. I'm also have a size 10 round and a size 3 round. And if you want more information on supplies and materials or specific brands and things that I use, you can go out and check out the description in the video, and everything is listed there. All right, so let's get started. This one is going to be some wet on wet. We're going to create a whole background and then put some flowers on top of it. Now there's a couple ways to do this. You can mask the sections out. I'm going to do the lazy way. Not the lazy way, but I'm not going to mask anything out. I'm just going to put my flowers over top of it, and the choices I make, I'm going to make sure they work together with the transparency and layering of watercolor. So I am going to create a whole background here, but we're going to do wet on wet. So I'm going to wet my whole page, and that's what I'm using my flat brush for. You could use a mop brush, a larger flat brush. This isn't too big of a space, so this 1/2 inch works fine. I thought a mop brush, my big mop brush, would be a little overkill for this smaller space, even though it would get the job done pretty quickly. So I'm just making sure that I have a nice even layer. And when you're working with 100% cotton, it does absorb a bit. You kind of have to give it a minute and then maybe put another layer on top of it. With cellulose or wood pulp papers, or percentage cotton papers, like maybe 25% or whatever, the water does tend to sit more on the surface and doesn't get absorbed as quickly and does more evaporation versus absorption. Or the paper gets really saturated really fast on those wood pulp papers. And that's why you get those crinkly, wrinkly. All right, so I don't want it to be, I feel like it's, there we go. Okay, I don't want like puddles of water sitting on top of here. There we go. But I do want a nice even sheen across so that if you let it sit for a second, it doesn't start to dry automatically. You can look at it to the side, like tilt your head to the side or down on an angle to kind of see that sheen. So I'm good. Everything is nice and damp. I'm going to take my sap green and my phthalo blue green shade to make a bluer green color. You might already have a bluer green color that's like a Viridian green that you might want to use, but I just love the mix of these two colors. And then take a little more blue here. I am going to start to add this to the edges. I'm going to stick with my square brush for now. And we're going to go all the way around. And because my paper is already wet, we're not going to get any harsh lines right away. You see everything's kind of bleeding out. Core does a really good job. The binder that's used in it, I guess, helps colors flow really nicely. I'll take a little bit darker. And don't worry, I'm not going to leave it just like this. I'm going to rinse off my brush. I'm going to start to kind of bring this closer to the center. And the more paint, I'm also adding more water and more pigment, more wet material to this as I add color. So keeping everything nice and wet. And I'm just kind of bringing it all in, creating this nice soft frame. And you can add more and more color if you want. I'm just gonna kind of bring some of these lines through it and not make it perfect, because it is going to be like grass and florals, and we're just creating a nice soft background for that. I don't know if I love these up here, so I like this because we're going to have our flower, we're going to kind of come out from the side across the page. So I'm going to just mess these up a little bit, taking more color and more pigment. I'm going to dabble that in on the sides. Along the bottoms. So I'm just using the edge of my brush to kind of get up on the edge and create some of this wispiness. And not doing anything with like super, intention of this is going to be a branch in the background. It's just, we're going to create a soft, hazy kind of background with this light in the middle. And the only thing I'm going to do is add some more of this dark color to the edges. Here and up here and here. Then we're going to let all of this dry. Beautiful. So yours will look different than mine. If you're attempting to do the same thing, it's going to be, its own thing. Every brush stroke can't be identical. You have to be loose and free and just kind of let it go. So that's our background. Let's let it dry, and then we'll come back and we'll put a nice little flower on top of it. All right, we are back, and that took about 15 minutes off camera for it to completely dry for mine, for 100% cotton. It'll probably go a little faster if you're using a wood pulp or cellulose paper, but because 100% cotton absorbs a lot of water, it takes a little bit longer to dry. You can let it dry naturally. I recommend that when you're doing something where you're doing wet on wet and doing these soft blends, to let it dry for at least 80% of the time naturally, because the paint is still moving around. And then if you want to take a heat gun or a hairdryer to it for the very end, for the last final stages of drying, you can definitely do that. Okay, so we're going to do some Bluebells in here, and I already have some color kind of mixed up here, but all it is Ultramarine and Magenta to get that lovely purpley blue color. There we go. We want it to be more on the blue side. So for these, let's see. I am going to, I think I'm going to paint out my stem part way. So I'm going to take this green. I'm actually going to take more of a sap green color. So I'm taking more sap green that has like a yellowish undertone to it. Now I love coarse sap green. It is not the same. Sap green is not the same as every other sap green. Just as a forewarning, this is a very rich yellow undertones and Just lovely sap green. The other sap greens in some other brands are a little bit lighter. You might want to add something to them, but I'm going to use this right from here. All right, so I'm going to just put kind of a stem. I'm going to go a little lighter because I can always add. That kind of travels to here. So it's going to be bluebells that are kind of bent over and like a big clump of them hanging. I probably could have gone a little higher so I could have the main part of the hanging part a little more in the center, but that's okay. Just putting these little wisps off of it. All right, so that's our setup for our stem. Now I'm going to go back to this larger brush. I'm going to start with some really light color. And the bluebell shape, you could draw these out first if you had wanted to, the whole thing. I'm just going to paint them. So let's see, I'm going to start here. And it is like a bell shape, so it's got a rounded top. And then, especially if it's falling over like this, the edges flare out a little bit. So I'm starting light, and I want some of them to overlap. And you'll see I left a tiny little gap in between, which we'll take care of later. One here. And you could do these one at a time and let things dry if you're nervous about too much overlapping. I'm going to do one down here as the stem kind of bends over and is behind the bluebells. We get like a they're like little ghosts. So again, I'm overlapping them. I'll define them more later. Another one here on the edge. And actually maybe like another one up here. I'm going to put one right here behind. And I am working around them. I don't want to paint right over them because of the transparency. You'll be able to look like you're seeing through the flowers. All right, so we have lots of overlapping pieces. Don't worry, we'll connect everything with stems and all that lovely stuff. But I am going to let these dry a little bit and start to add more definition. I'll go within with my smaller brush likely. You know, let's add another one like right over here, but like kind of at a bit of an angle. I'm going to put just some little flicks. There. Okay. So as those are drying, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to attach some of them. So these are, you can see, like attached over at the top with these bent sections. All right, I'm going to use my heat tool to dry everything so we can start adding on some more layers. All right, everything is nice and dry. Now I'm going to take some darker color here. And I'm going to start with my ones in the back. So I'm working around the edge of this here. The bottoms of them are definitely lighter than the tops. Dropping in some extra color. Let's do this one out here. It's all by its lonesome. So I'm going to go really dark at the top. Rinse my brush off. And we'll keep going up here. So anything that's darkest is going to get pushed into the background, into shadow. And let's see, this one back here. Leave a little highlight right there. You can see I'm dabbing off my brush a lot to get rid of excess paint and water that I don't need at the moment. Sometimes I just need a damp brush to move around what's already on there or to blend it out. Let's give this one a little darker color at the top. And this one up front here. Now the easiest thing or the hardest thing, a little of both, to do is end up with everything that is kind of the same value. There's not a lot of contrast, so they'll all be kind of the same mid-tone purple, purpley blue. Actually, I'm going to add a little more blue to this for my next layer. But when you go back in for additional layers, finding those spots where you can add that darker contrast, go even a little darker on your shadowy areas, or the bluebells that are like behind these can be much darker than what is up front. So now this last layer that I think I'm going to do, I'm going to add this dark blue to some areas, giving them just more of a blue tint than purple. I feel like I got a little too purple for bluebells. Then I'm going to let everything dry, and we're going to come back and see what other details we can add. One of the best things you can do is walk away from a painting after you've done a lot of work, but with the intention that it's not done. Knowing that there's more to do. It's the hardest thing to do, is to walk away at that stage, because you're like, oh no, I have to do, but just walk away. And then come back and reassess. After things have dried, they've settled, and you have a clearer picture of what needs to be done next. And you'll have a lot more control kind of where you're going next. All right, so we're going to let this dry, and we're going to come back for our last layers of details. All right, we're back and everything is dry. One of the things I feel like I didn't do enough of is make it really apparent that they have these curly kind of ends, but that's okay. I'm going to come back on with this top layer with more textured detail. So I'm not going to blend this layer out as much. Oop. And I'm going to do ultramarine, magenta, and some Payne's gray. That went very magenta, but that's okay. Super dark. Let's see if we can bring some of that curly Q end into some of these. They're very nondescript at the end, just kind of fluttery at the bottom. They definitely, I think, have some curl up. So I'm basically just emphasizing the sides. And again, we're in our journals, and this is where we learn. This isn't a flower I paint often, but I love that I took it on, and I'll try it again another time. You make adjustments on how you portray the flower, how you design it. And sometimes you're just using inspiration from nature, and you can really paint whatever you want. It doesn't have to be an actual bluebell. And let's see. All right, I'm going to go back in with some green, some darker green in some of these areas. Just kind of retouch the connections. Darker on the bottom here. My heat is working really hard this morning. It's very cold today. It's like 10 degrees outside right now. And then you know what? We have this in the foreground. It's really nice and sharp. And then we have this background. I'm going to add a few more elements in the foreground that are going to be more sharp and not as fuzzy. So just some more grass up here. Just have harsher lines, or sharper lines, I should say. They're not harsh. They're what grass is supposed to be. So this is all kind of on the plane with the flowers. And I guess I have to go all the way across now. And let's take a little bit darker green, super dark on these edges here. There we go. All right, we have our little bluebells. We can take off our tape around the edges. Mine is extra sticky. You can heat yours up with your heat gun or your blow dryer if you have one. If you're worried about tearing your paper. This ball hung paper is pretty tough. All right, there we go. Our lovely little bluebells in the forest. Thank you for painting with me today. I always enjoy your company while I paint. Don't forget to check out the description for links to supplies and materials. Go ahead and leave a comment, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share with a friend if you think they would like to learn a little bit about watercolor painting, or at least watch and join us on the journey. All right, y'all, take care. Happy painting. I'll see you for our next page soon.